for a phone that works, and we're here. Good evening. Hey, Ben. Hey. Is Trish coming?
She's here.
Oh, great, great. Okay. I was talking about her today. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming tonight. My name is Barbara Udit. I'm the president of the Gulf Brazilian Historical Society, and we are so glad to have you here. We've got a great program tonight, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And I forgot to ask somebody ahead of time. Christian, I'm going to, when we get to the Pledge of Allegiance, I'm going to let you lead that off, okay? Okay. So, let's go ahead and we'll get started, and if you'll bow with me, we're just going to open with prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we just love you so much, and we thank you so much for this beautiful day, and we thank you for this amazing city that we get to live in. This whole area, Father, is so amazing, and we're going to hear today about your amazing creations of trees. And but we thank you for helping us and leading us and guiding us. Be with us tonight and bring everyone here safely and bring them home safely. We love you so much, and we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, and now we're going to do, if you'll rise, we're going to do the salute to the flag, and I'm going to let Christian start us off.
Actually, my son was
Conrad. Oh, yes, Conrad.
I'm good, you can do it.
Yeah. Well, whoever.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. All right, and I'm going to ask Jim Cox to come up, and he's going to introduce our speaker for this evening.
Did you tie one on, Jim?
He's advertising something really exciting that's going on.
I would like to introduce our speaker this evening, is Erin Hurd. He's the owner of the Hurd Brothers Tree Care and does other landscaping work all throughout the Gulf trees in this whole peninsula. And he's been a super friend to the Historical Society. Not only has he trimmed trees at the Benson House at a huge discount, okay, but he's been finding people to help support it as well, okay, and so he's been a great friend to us. Also, coming up, and you'll hear more about this tonight, okay, you've heard about our largest live oak contest, okay. You can buy these ribbons, put around the live oak tree. And Erin has agreed to help us with the final judging for that contest. Okay, so he's helped us in many, many ways. Okay, so I'm here tonight. Erin's going to talk about prepare your tree for high winds, and I think you might also talk a little about the live oaks.
Thank you.
Jim, thank you.
I hope everybody can hear me without the mic. I don't like the really powerful microphone. I think my voice sounds fine, so I'm very loud. So my name is Erin Hurd. My company is Hurd Brothers Tree Care. And I think it's great tonight that my brother surprised me and he came in because he was my partner for 26 or 27 years we worked together, and now he's with Hurd Real Estate. I'm sure y'all have seen their signs around, and his office is right up by across from the post office. Right across.
And I know we are not old enough for y'all to have been around for 26 years, so that's my piece.
Well, basically, we have been doing tree work all our life. It's 32 years now.
Wow.
For me. I actually started full-time, I would say, at Hurricane Hugo in 1989. It's basically when I kind of started and Gene came in too. In 1989, Hurricane Hugo hit in South Carolina. And we went there and worked, and that's where basically our tree career started. A little bit about me. I am a certified arborist. I am also risk assessment qualified, and then the newest qualification this year, it just started, and I was part of the beta program. I went down as a 3-day training course you go to, and it's called Prescription Pruning Qualified. And basically what that is, if we can move on to the next slide, that's on to the next one. Okay, back up. These may not be in order, okay. So what we're gonna do, I'll talk about that once we move into the pruning for, talking about pruning trees and what to do for storm season. First, I want to talk about the Florida tree law, because I know there's been a lot of talk about that, and when it first came out. So it, was passed in 2019. And so when they passed this law, a lot of people, which I'm so happy around here, got really upset, because basically what the law said is any certified arborist or landscape architect could go to a resident's house and basically call a tree dangerous and remove the tree without a permit from the city. We could surpass getting a permit from the city. Well, of course, a lot of people took advantage of that system. We had arborists from other states sending us text messages say, hey, any tree you want to cut down, you pay me some money, I'll write you a letter, and you can cut this tree down. So our Florida chapter stepped in and said, you know, wait a minute. And they went to the state and said, you know, we need to look at this again, and we need to think about this. And so now, when they amended it in 2022, basically what we have to do is we have to come out and do a risk assessment of this tree that you have concerns with. And if we cannot mitigate it below moderate, then removal would probably be recommended. But if we can mitigate that issue, which is what we should try to do by, you know, removing branches, maybe codominant stems, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit, or anything we could do to fix that tree and save it, that's our first priority in assessing the tree. So that's kind of where that stands right now. I know there people read a lot about it. You see a lot of posts from lawyers actually on be cautious on how this is done. You still can get in trouble if you do this the wrong way and somebody comes out and says, I'll just write you a letter. Make sure they are a certified arborist. And if you'll go back one, okay, if you look by my name, it says certified arborist, it must have an FL and then the numbers by it, or if they're from Alabama and you talk to somebody from Alabama that says they're a certified arborist, it would just be AL and then their numbers. So that's how you'll know. Does anybody here know how to find an arborist? Nobody knows here. Okay, that's another thing that our ISA is not doing a great job of, but you can actually just type on your computer, find an arborist. The ISA site's going to pop up, and then you can put your area by your area code. You can put Gulf Breeze, Pensacola, wherever you want, and you can find all the arborists in that area by just going and typing in find an arborist. Let's go to the next slide, and then the one, actually two. There you go, the next one. Okay, so preparing our trees for high winds. This is what we do not want to do. Lion tail a tree or over elevate the tree really high. A lot of people will do this and they tell you, well, the winds blow through the trees and it helps the wind move through the trees better. Basically what we're doing here is we're really stressing the tree out. Lion's tail means that if you can see in this tree, they've taken all the foliage out to the very end, so it looks basically like a lion's tail. And then of course our canopy now is really high. Well, in our studies with this new prescription pruning, we talked about winds. And where are our highest winds? They're up high because nothing's buffering those winds. So now our tree is at risk of breaking or falling apart because, one, we have stressed the tree because we've over pruned it, and now we push the canopy up to where it's taking the brunt of the strongest winds. Next slide. So what do we do? Well, we hire an arborist who has a prescription pruning qualification. What is this? Well, that's a great question. And here's our answer. And I'm going to let y'all read this because it's kind of like a tongue twister if you're looking at it. There's a lot of P words in there like prescription and pruning. But this basically tells what we went through, and then I'm going to explain a little more on how we do this. So basically this is designed, so I am the prescriber. I come out, talk to you, we talk about your tree. We can go ahead and move to the next slide. So an arborist meets and the client to discuss their concerns, and I ask, you know, what are your concerns with the tree, or what your goals are. A lot of the times it could be insurance, right? Insurance says, we gotta trim our trees up, we need to lift them up, or we gotta do this, okay? Have an arborist assess that tree, because we can write a letter back to the insurance company saying, we don't wanna take those limbs off. It's gonna hurt the tree more than it's gonna help the tree. And a lot of times the insurance companies will work with you on that if you have a certified arborist and a letter from us. So we meet with you and we talk about the tree, and we figure out what your concerns or what your needs are, okay? And then from there, next slide. It says, what do I do when I assess a tree? Well, the first thing I do when I come out to assess a tree is I start at the bottom and move up. Okay, I look at the root collar area of the tree. I want to see a nice flare around the root collar where I see some roots coming out into the ground. Sometimes you'll see a tree that's buried too deep, or people build up and push old dirt and leaves and stuff up around the tree, and basically you don't see this trunk flare going into the ground, or the root collar flare. This is something that's very important. And then the next thing I do when I'm looking at this area is that I look for any kind of fungus that's growing or any kind of decay that may cause structural problems where this tree would become a hazard. Okay, next.
Excuse me, Mayor.
What's that?
Can I ask you a question now, or do you want me to hold it till the end?
I think we'll hold them till the end, and then we'll
Okay.
slide back
Yeah.
through there.
Yeah.
The next thing I look for is in the trunk or stem taper. So we call this a trunk or a stem. As you can see in this tree, it starts out nice and fat at the bottom here, and it starts to taper as it goes up. And I'm going to talk about this a little more as we move in through here. What we're trying to do now is we're trying to design trees and prune them to promote growth in the trunk and have the same size trunk basically all the way up. Next slide. Another thing we look for is codominant stems in a tree. When we have a situation like this, one of the first things we want to do is look at the union area where the two trees come together. As you can see here, this is kind of dark, but this is a kind of a V shape in here. We'd much rather this be more of a U shape. There's much more stability in that area if there's a U shape. So on something like this with this tree, because it's so large and older, we would probably recommend putting a cable or a rod into this tree. That's what we could do. That's how we could mitigate this tree from being a hazard. Okay, next slide. Branch attachments. Now this is basically like another codominant stem, but I wanted to show this. It's a live oak, and this is such a great branch attachment here. You see basically that U shape in here. We see no stress cracks along through here, and it's nice and thick, kind of basically on both sides. Both sides are almost equal, and this is a very good branch attachment. If we see stress cracks and things like that, then that's something we may say that's a way we can mitigate by removing, and it may be a large limb. We either may try to reduce that limb or maybe have to remove the whole limb. Next slide. Overextended limbs, limbs that stick out above or past the main canopy of the tree. As you can see here, this is starting to grow out over the street here and out further than the rest of the main canopy, and then we have one over the house. Basically what we do on this is we try to make a reduction cut. A reduction cut is reducing the limb back to another stem that would become the new central leader of that branch that is at least about 1/3 of the size of the branch. If we have to, okay, these are cuts I don't like to make. I've talked about it at our new prescription pruning class. It's called a heading cut. And basically what a heading cut is we cut all the foliage off and there's nothing left but a big nub sticking out of wood. The only way we would do that is if we needed to reduce that branch and there was nowhere to take it back to, then we would cut it back to 4 or 5 foot out from the branch attachment. And the reason we do that is to slow the movement of the decay that's going to happen in that branch from cutting it that way, moving back into the main trunk of the tree, which will in turn cause problems for the rest of the tree later. So making a heading cut, sometimes we just have to do it. okay? I don't like to do it. Most people, you know, it's like, it doesn't look good, and it just is a big nub sticking out there. Sometimes it'll put some water sprouts out, but it's still gonna decay back to the rest of the tree. Next slide. Decay is something we look for. This is a really bad sign of decay here, but this little tree is still standing, and what do we see here? We got a sidewalk. So could this be a hazard? Yes, this definitely could be a hazard because we have a sidewalk and we have pedestrians walking down the sidewalk. It's not a very tall tree, but it does have a little canopy to it. In this case, yes, I would recommend removing this tree because of having pedestrians going down the sidewalk. There's other signs of decay we can look for and that, you know, used to identify that as different funguses and stuff growing on the tree. But those are things we look for when we talk about what we can do to mitigate or assessing the tree for maybe removing it. Next slide. Okay, after I assess the tree, I will write a pruning prescription based off of my assessment to meet the client's concerns and make safer, stronger, healthier trees. Okay, so basically, after I talk to you and we figure out what we need to do to this tree, whether it's insurance purposes or just concerns that we have, most people, when I go to visit them, the first thing they say is, I know this tree is going to fall on my house if we have a hurricane. The first thing I say to them is, how do you know we're going to have a hurricane? And they're like, we live in Florida. And the second they say, we're due for a hurricane. I said, okay. And my brother can verify this. When was the last time South Carolina was hit by a hurricane? South Carolina. I think it was 1989, Hurricane Hugo. So South Carolina's due before we're due, right? So
You wish.
they get a storm before we get a storm. Okay, next slide. Okay, so what about my newly planted tree? Is my newly planted tree I'm putting in a decurrent or an excurrent tree? So excurrent is one central leader, and this is where we're going to talk about that central leader again. And then decurrent is multiple scaffold branches. It's more of what our live oaks love to do, and that's grow over, out, and down. Okay, next slide. Okay, we can be more aggressive when we're pruning young trees. So when we're pruning an excurrent tree, we try to make sure it has one central leader and no cluster branches. And why do we do that? So having alternating limbs allows more nutrients to move up the main leader to make it have less taper. So our goal is, let's move on to the next and go one more. So here's two trees. This tree is one central leader and we have a lot of cluster branches here. Now this is not the same tree. This is a live oak and this is a little maple tree. Now this maple tree, I recently pruned this and it looked just like this tree. So basically what I'm doing is reducing these limbs so I can promote more nutrients to move up through the main leader and make this the same size as it is here above this. The first branches on the trunk of the tree are called the first order branches. This is what we call them. And so we want the diameter to be the same size here above the first order branches so that the tree will be much more durable when it comes to storms. So trees that have more taper, pine trees have that a lot. There's not a lot you can do with pine trees when you're pruning, but if you notice a lot of them that snap in storms, it's because they have taper and they get smaller as they get taller. Cluster branches are a lot of branches that grow in one area together. What happens here is the tree uses a lot of its energy and nutrients pushing out all of these branches to provide nutrients to them, and that's why we get less taper in the trunk of the tree. So let's go back a slide. Okay, decurrent trees look for cluster growth, we just talked about there, and then overextended limbs and bad branch attachments. When you get a decurrent tree, we'll go back up to the decurrent. Next one, there you go. So this tree will be made into a decurrent tree. And basically what we're going to look for in here where we got this is we're going to reduce some of this clustering growth in here. And we're going to look at the branch attachments. And if we see that we've got some bad branch attachments, we'll pick those and then we remove those out. We'll also go up into this area and do the same thing. And we'll just remove branches back and we'll start to design this tree to be what we want it to be. and we'll have good branch attachments, good growth patterns, and more durable trees. Okay? We'll go 2 slides now. Oh, back one. Okay, so. Stick there.
Is that the end of the slides?
Yeah, this would be the last one. I don't know if we could go back to the full screen.
So let me play.
Well, that's okay. So, does anybody know where this tree is at? Can anybody identify this tree? It's right here locally.
It's not on the nature trail across the street there, is it?
Exactly
I
right.
saw that decayed tree, I think is also on the nature trail.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
the one, the very large one. They have the bench by
Yeah.
on there.
Yeah.
This is an amazing tree that's over there, and as far as I've hiked through the areas over there, this is probably the oldest tree you can find over there for sure. There are some other big or large live oaks over there. And I'll take questions in a minute, but I did want to talk about this because we said we would, and I put my green ribbon around the tree. So we are trying to sell ribbon for the largest live oak contest and for the most live oaks in 1 yard, and correct me if I'm wrong, over 60 inches in circumference.
Yes.
Right? Okay? And then we have 32561 category and a 32563 category. So we're gonna have 2 divisions.
And we're gonna do, a single tree, but then I made another category for the trees that have the, co-dominant.
Yes.
Because I thought that sort of, somebody that's got one really, really big tree shouldn't be in competition with the tree that's got 5 limbs, 4 limbs.
Yes.
or
So the
trunks.
codominant that she's talking about is that we ran into is some of the codominant trees, they split very low at the ground, so you couldn't measure them at 3.5 feet. And so we're letting the person pick whether they want to measure each stem or go to that lowest point and measure around that whole trunk at the bottom where they all join together. So that kind of had to, we had to change and make a new division for that because there are a lot of codominant or even tridominant trunks around here, and I've got one that's going to be in the competition in 32563. And it's a really large tree when you measure it either way, if you measure all 3 stems or measure around the bottom. So if you've already bought ribbon, that is great, and we really appreciate it. If you have people that you know that have oak trees, or maybe you want to just donate and sponsor somebody else's oak tree, as long as they get permission to do that, they just need to have them sign the form and say, yes, you can pay and put my oak tree in the contest. We need all the participants we can get. So you're selling ribbon here tonight also?
Yes, we have it tonight, and we'll be at the art festival. We have our booth right here in the lobby, Saturday and Sunday, and we're gonna sell ribbon there too.
Okay, so this Saturday and Sunday, you can come to the booth here inside and buy a ribbon, or you can call me and I'll come by your house and measure your tree and put the ribbon on it for you. So either way. You got any questions? I know you had one earlier.
Yeah, so for the root collar you were talking about, so you said that you can come up to a tree and look at the root collar and assess a lot about its health. Now, I've seen some people sort of put stone around it and then fill it in with dirt, and then this was big up north where I used to live, and then put little colorful plants, for a pop of color. Is that bad for the tree? Because in other words, it's holding moisture on the root collar. You can't get to the root collar at all.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So basically, can we go through to?
Just before you leave that slide, do you have any idea how old that tree is, Erin?
A lot older than me.
Is there a way?
I think there's something that says down there that I don't know if it was 150 or something, but, I mean, And we'll go back to that in a minute, the way that trees growing, you can see, I mean, just a lot of flexure wood growing around there where the tree's been through so much stress with storms. And that's why you see all that bulging around the top of the tree. So, yeah, basically on this, our critical root zone in the tree is from our drip line in. So from the ends of the branches in, we want to do everything we can to protect that area. Now, do we do it most of the time? Nope. Grass with live oaks, they'll dominate. There are some other trees that the grass will compete and stress, okay? So anytime we can protect that area from the drip line in, which is the ends of your limbs in, is what we want to do, because that's the most critical part of the root zone, is that area. And yeah, building up with sand, even too much mulch. You know, you see a lot of people do what we call volcanoing, and they just build a whole lot up onto the trunk, and it looks basically like a volcano. You don't want to do that even with newly planted trees. Sometimes you see people that put a mulch ring around a newly planted tree, and that may be their watering system to water it in for the first couple of weeks. But then that should be knocked down after 2 weeks. So yes, it's very crucial to protect all that. This area is at a church over in Pensacola. I was just assessing their trees there. And the first thing I was talking to them about is like, don't let anybody park under here anymore. And then we would actually start bringing in a little bit of soil at a time, about 2 inches of soil. And we start to cover some of these roots out here a little bit. We just don't want to get in here where we're like 3 or 4 or getting up onto the root collar. But we do want to try to keep these roots out here covered just a little bit. And so we add a little bit of soil at a time, and then we come back and do that again. Or we just kind of block that area off, which I tried to talk to them about. This is a you can't tell by the picture, but I would almost imagine that this tree is probably 100 to 150 years old easily. I mean, it's very old. So yeah, definitely want to protect that critical root zone.
So there's nothing you really ought not do anything. Just leave it uncovered. Just leave it uncovered.
Yeah, the best scenario for this tree is what we see right here.
Okay.
As natural as we can get, and I prefer, does anybody in here work for Lowe's? I prefer not to use colored mulch. I prefer to use my mulch that I make. Good natural mulch that will break down, or leaves that will add amendments back to the soil. You can take your old dead wood that falls out of the tree and break it up and throw it in there. If you want to, build a little ring around your tree. I have a live oak in my backyard, and I've made a nice bed around it, around my drip line of my tree. And all I put in there are leaves, some of my mulch that I make, and then any old dead wood that falls out, I just break them up and throw them in there and cover them with leaves.
Does the root collar of areas that you're suggesting, do that apply to all trees or just live oak? It would be for junipers and
Everything.
hickory trees and all that stuff?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, even pine trees. They have a huge, enormous taproot, but they also have big stabilizing roots that grow over, kind of out and down. I don't know if a lot of people went over the Argonne Bridge after Sally, and we had to all go that way. Did y'all notice the pine tree that got washed out over there and see the root structure on that tree, how amazing it was? It is really neat to see, which now I don't even know if it's still standing there, but it ended up dying. But you could see the enormous taproot, and then you could see the large stabilizing roots just kind of going over and just sticking into the ground like this. And there were just a huge ring of them around basically what we would call the critical root zone.
Is that on the right side?
Yes,
Yeah.
right as you got off.
Not if you're on the north side.
Yeah, it was really cool to see.
Okay, one other question. Lawrence Street, I don't think it's a live oak, I'm sorry, I don't know what it is, but one of our hurricanes tilted it, the roots aren't showing, but one side of your root collar is kind of built up with sand and stuff. Is that a tree that you would recommend cutting down, or is there a way to take the weight off of the leaning side so that that leaning tree doesn't go into my next tree, which is a live oak?
Mm-hmm. Yep, I would look at doing any kind of reduction cuts I could do first to take weight off to help that root side. And then, you know, if you can't, and depending on the type of tree it is, it's a live oak.
No, it's leaning next to live, I'm sorry,
Okay.
I'm very, not very smart about what kind of trees I have. I do have live oak, but this one isn't a live oak, I'm not sure what it is, I
Yeah.
don't remember.
Yeah, and that's okay. If it's a water oak, you know, we would definitely need to reduce the top of it or the canopy of it to help it. Their root structure is not as strong as a live oak, but yeah, I would look at doing reduction cuts first to save the tree, for sure.
And so when you come out to look at somebody's trees, because I have 2 or 3 different issues, do you come out and give a free estimate, or is there a charge to come out and look at all the trees?
Well, and this is the hard part, if I'm just giving you an estimate on something you wanna cut or remove, it's free. If I'm doing an assessment, there is a fee for that coming out, and it just depends on, there's levels of assessment. The easiest assessment we do is what we call limited visual assessment. We just come out and walk around the tree and look. We can get all the way into what we call level 3, which is where we have to get up into the tree, whether it's using a lift or putting somebody in the tree. It may be a branch union we're trying to look at up there when you get into larger trees and stuff like that. So there are fees. It's just based on what a level of the assessment is.
My live oak has exposed roots in the yard, but you're saying not to cover it?
The ones outside of the critical root zone, or am I in your way of seeing that? So basically, I don't really want to cover it from about here in, which I would say this is probably 3 or 4 feet away from the root collar here. Out here, when I get out 5 feet or further out, I want to try to start to cover these if I can. If they're exposed, I may add 2 to 3 inches of soil, and if I've got some grass in the yard that's growing with it, and I'll try to let the grass grow through there, and then maybe add another couple inches at a time. I don't wanna just maybe go in and put a half a foot or a foot of soil on the ground, just to try to cover all these big roots. So over time, you can basically cover these out here, but it may take a couple years or so, you know? And a lot of times people wanna do that for mowing purposes, like I'm always mowing and I hit the root, and I'm like, well, I don't want you to mow there, really. I'd rather you take some scissors and clip it. I don't even want you to use a string trimmer, because we don't wanna damage these roots. But if we start adding soil 2 to 3 inches at a time, eventually we can get those areas covered up.
Because my drip line is over my driveway and almost in my neighbor's yard.
You got a lot of area to cover.
What is the critical zone? Is it dependent on the diameter of the tree base?
It's compared on, it depends on the limbs of the tree. So wherever the ends of my limbs are, like if this is the ends of my limbs, from here in to the root collar of the tree is what's called my critical root zone. So,
You're saying 3 or 4 feet from the
well,
base.
if I'm gonna use soil to try to cover some roots that are exposed, I don't wanna add any soil over the roots from here up. So 3 or 4 feet away, I'm not doing anything, I'm just gonna have exposed roots. So that's, yeah. So doing that, I would either, have a bed around it with some mulch, or, you know, just put something around there, a ring or some sort. But I would not add any soil from that distance in.
I guess that distance is based on the diameter, or?
No, it's just, you just don't want to cover that area because you're more likely to get funguses developing around that root collar. If something happened out here where we got a fungus, we can root prune once we start to move out here. In this close, we cannot root prune when we get that close to the tree. So,
That'll do it.
yeah.
That'll do it in.
Yeah, and that is something else you can do. If you got roots that are sticking up and they're out past the drip line, we can root prune those. And basically what we're doing is just like cutting a limb. You just have to expose the root and make a nice clean cut on that root. And then that root will put out new sprouts, just like a limb would do, and keep growing from there.
Yeah, our rules for our contest are, you measure diameter at 3.5 feet. But if it branches out before then, you can measure underneath that, okay? Now, if you've got like a codominant or tridominant tree where it branches out quickly, you say you can measure both or all three of them. Would you use the same 3.5 foot off the ground rule
Yes.
for that? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Up here that fork, at the trunk goes up about, yeah, right in there.
Uh-huh.
Tell me how do y'all drill through there and put a bolt through there with nuts and tighten it up? Do that make it split and open?
Yes, if we're gonna put a cable in this tree, or.
Or you put a cable?
Well, it depends on the tree and the way it's growing. Like here, we would have to use a cable probably because we don't want to put our, cable or rod here. It really wouldn't help us a lot.
Right.
So basically, we'd probably go up into this area, and we'd find 2 areas to drill through here. And so at this distance, we'd have to use a cable. Now, what a cable does when you cable the tree is it doesn't just pull that and then you're protected, and the trees, nothing's gonna happen. What it's doing is when we have winds and heavy winds and the winds pull the limbs apart, it takes the pressure and then takes the pressure off of this union that we're concerned about.
So you wouldn't put a bolt through that line?
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's not gonna do a whole lot to put a bolt in here. So there's a lot of strength in this area when you think of storms. What happens in the storms is, and this is what's so bad about overextended limbs when you get big live oaks, is the wind catches the ends of those limbs and pulls them. And then that's what, with the limb, you know, and how the winds blow in a storm, it's just crazy, pulls them apart and then puts pressure on this union, which may cause it to split. So if we put the cable up here, as the wind blows, that cable tightens and then takes that pressure off of that union.
Okay, next question.
Uh-huh.
On oak trees, big oak trees, I see a lot of vines growing up through the trees. What's the correct way of taking care of vines? Cutting at the base and pulling things down?
Greenbrier.
Clip them and be as careful as you can. Don't chop them with an axe and chop into the bark of the tree or anything. Yeah, pull them away, clip them, and then get them up as high as you can, you know. I tell people a lot of times to maybe go about 10 feet because then when you're walking and looking, you just don't see them. And then you just basically have to let them die out of the tree.
So actually, the vines will actually choke the tree, won't it?
Yes, it will.
What if they're already embedded into the bark, you just have to move them?
No, you can use like, we have little picking devices we use. You can use a screwdriver, just be careful with it, and you're just trying to barely pry it away enough to clip it. You can use like a strong putty knife, sometimes we do that, and we just kind of rub it to kind of make it break free and get it enough where we can clip it there, something like that.
We have those in the Benson house, they're growing into the bark.
That's what I'm getting at. I got one vine, and that's roughly about 3 to 4 inches in diameter, and just choking this beautiful tree. I mean, just choking it.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna cut that hammer and knock it down.
Yep.
The vine, I'm talking about.
Right.
Not the tree, the vine.
Is it Greenbrier?
Pardon me?
Is it Greenbrier? That Greenbrier stuff?
The what?
With the pricklies on it? The
No,
Greenbrier?
this
Oh,
one.
it's not a
It's
Greenbrier?
a big vine. I kid you not, this thing about 3 to 4 inches in diameter. I may run a man lift and go up and get all those vines out of that tree. I mean, that's up there probably 20, 30 feet up in the air, and it's all entwined on that thing.
I know the one you're talking
I'm
about.
gonna get that thing down.
I know the one you're talking about.
What about Spanish moss? I know tons of it in my oak tree.
Yeah, it's not really gonna hurt the tree. Basically, we don't wanna see it out on the twig ends over the foliage. If it's really dominating those areas, it's a very slow, tedious process, and you just have to barely, hand pick it out of there. But you do want to pull some, it's just like vine, it will suffocate those branches and the leaves.
Should I take it now?
Yeah, if you really have a lot of it on your twig ends.
But be careful, it's got chiggers in it. Careful of the chiggers in there. Chigger bugs.
When you buy a
They get in you bad, man.
It comes with a stake, and so when you plant the tree,
Make me itch thinking.
do we want to, like, if I wanted to remove the stake, it would leave a void in the soil where the stake was. Would you recommend removing the stake? Or pulling the stake and then pushing, soil into it, or, you know, compacting soil in
Yeah.
the void?
The only time I would leave a stake is if I plant something that's probably less than an inch in diameter that you buy. And then I wouldn't leave it very long. If the tree, you know, depending, a lot of times with fruit trees, you know, the stake, you need it until the roots stabilize a little bit. But anything over that, I never leave a stake on the tree, ever.
Is the Florida tree law just for live oaks?
Nope.
It's for all?
It's for all trees except for invasive trees. Invasive trees you can cut down no matter what size they are.
And so what is the law? Once you get a certain size, you need to cut it down.
Yeah, it's based on, like, for the city of Gulf Breeze, it's 12 inches in diameter or larger. So anything over 12 or 12 inches or greater. Santa Rosa County, most people
40
don't,
minutes.
you know, worry about that down in that area of the south, but they just changed the diameter size in January. It's now 24 inches in diameter in the south end of Santa Rosa County. So anything 24 inches or larger, you have a permit.
Is it cherry laurel invasive?
Yes.
What'd you say? You said 24 inches
In diameter.
in diameter,
Yeah.
that'd be permitted.
Yes.
Or what do you mean permitted? Like, they come
To
out with
remove
it?
Yeah, the county has to come out and okay the tree to be removed.
Aaron, what about crepe myrtles?
For removal?
Are they invasive, or are they
Nope.
good, or are they bad, are they?
They're good.
They're
Most
good,
people
okay.
crepe myrtle and think of them as a shrub,
Yeah.
but they're a hardwood tree.
It's the popcorn trees that are
Popcorns
bad
are
invasive.
invasive.
But crepe myrtles are good, okay.
Yep. One more question?
When you do the grouping cuttings and trim out those branches, do you leave the 5 inch, or, you know, do you leave a length, or do you cut them right next to the top? Like when you were saying, I'm gonna thin out this one when there's too many groupings at the same level, when you're a younger tree, do you cut them real close to it, or is it always gonna have small hanging branches?
Some of them I'll remove and some I'll reduce.
The age of the tree or size of them?
Yep. And then sometimes on the young trees, we trim every year, or we may trim every 3 years, depending on the stage. And so if I reduce a branch and I know it's gonna eventually come off, then the next year it may get removed and then some other ones reduced until we get our design, whether we're trying to go ex-current or a current tree.
I have an amazing new appreciation of how complex trees are.
That's
And
true.
I'm delighted that we have people like Erin around that can think through it, where I could never do that, you know? So, thank you very much. Super, thank you very much.
Let's give Erin another round of applause. Ginger crinkle cookies.
Bring them back this way. Hey, Miss Trash, are you doing?
And there are cookies on the table over here for everybody here, so they're in little Ziploc bags, you can either eat them here or take them with you. But thank you so
I don't
much,
like
that
to
was
either.
fascinating and
Bye,
interesting
drive
and
safe.
important, so we really, appreciate that.
Bye, Julie.
We're going to, go on with our program now. I know Jim has to leave early tonight because he's got a conflict, but Jim is our vice president, Jim Cox, and he lines up our programs and all. So before he leaves, I'm just gonna have him just quickly review the next programs coming up.
April 18th, okay?
And this, you have an agenda at your seat, and this would be like towards the bottom of the agenda.
Okay. But on April 18th, we have the Driftwood Garden Club. They're a 60-year-old garden club.
70.
70, okay, 70-year-old garden club, and they've done multiple projects throughout the Gulf Breeze area, including, if you go to Shoreline Park, ghost dancer, okay, of the Naoki Indian tribe coming. And he's gonna talk about Northwest Florida history that you've never heard of before. Because we all tend to think of Gulf Breeze history as starting either, like in the 1870s when the Duncans first moved here, or in 1931 when the first bridge was built, or 1960 when we were incorporated. But they go back hundreds of years in Northwest Florida. So I'm really looking forward to hearing the part of history that we never think about. We all think about white man's history. This is the real history there.
And what tribe is that?
The Muskogee Indians.
Oh, the Muskogee. Muskogee. Muskogee, okay.
Yeah, Billy Weston. Billy Weston and the
And then in
Mayo.
July, we have Tom Hudson, and Barbara, you can tell about Tom.
Yeah, he's a surfer and, grew up with Yancey Spencer and, who's, that's the statue on the beach. He's called the godfather of surfing in this area. But, Tom Hudson, he posts all the time on Facebook, all these, old, photos of, and I called him up and I said, Tom, the surf, people laugh because the Gulf of Mexico is not really, it's not like Hawaii or even the oceans, But the local surfers, you have to be, I think, more talented than ever to be able to surf.
That's right.
And so there's a whole tribe of surfers here, and that's why there's so many surf shops. So, and I know they love it when there's a hurricane coming in, because even though it's not supposed to go in then, but that's when they can really surf, so. Okay, thank you, Jim, we appreciate that. And that was a wonderful program, Erin, and we so appreciate you promoting our contest. And it's taking off, slowly but surely, it's taking off. And I know sometimes the people are like, well, I don't think I have the biggest tree. Well, that isn't it. It's not just, you're gonna win a prize. Trust me, our prizes aren't gonna be like amazing prizes. They're gonna be token prizes, and we're gonna recognize the people. But it's more to participate and acknowledge the amazing place we live in, the amazing trees we have, and I want everybody to sort of be like, well, I need my tree to have a ribbon around it, because they have ribbons around their trees, so I'm hoping it does catch on. I just got a phone call before I left tonight, a man that lives on High Point, and he wants to buy 100 feet of ribbon for his trees. He has 14 live oaks in his yard. Do you know Doug Hightower is his name? I don't know whether Erin knows him. But I said, oh yes, I'll come to you and bring it to you. They're going to come to the art festival. So that is, we're excited that we're going to be, so right when you walked in tonight, when you come in, we're going to be right there in the lobby. They're going to have face painting in the far alcove, and then there'll be art. Something's going on in this room, and then something's going on in the other room. But we're going to be in the lobby and out of the elements. I am so excited about that. So anyway, let me go on with the business part of the